Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to be rising up on the debate for Bill C-76 today. And I know we've had a lot of conversations in this House of Commons about the Liberals and their plans for debating this particular bill, or the ideas behind the bill, because as this House knows, Bill C-33 was languishing at first reading for 18 months. And so we then finally had this House of Commons, or have the government bring in Bill C-76 on April 30th. And that was precisely during the month when the acting Chief Electoral Officer had previously informed the government and informed all members of Parliament that he wanted to see the changes on behalf of Elections Canada put in place in April of 2018, so that Elections Canada actually had the opportunity to implement the changes in time for the 2019 election. And so here we are. It's now well past the halfway mark in May, and we are debating the bill at second reading. And I'm by no means making an argument that the House should not have its look at this legislation. My main criticism is the fact that the government has been sitting on this file for so long, and they have really left it to the 11th hour to bring in major reform of our electoral system. And Liberals have made arguments that, oh, this issue has been looked at by the Procedure and House Affairs Committee, that these concepts have been debated. But I acknowledge that is the case, but debating issues and policies at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee is very different from actually looking at a piece of legislation, especially one that is as large as this particular bill. And so to dump this bill into the House of Commons on April 30th, to have its first day of debate on May 10th and then May 11th and then today, and then to suddenly expect the House of Commons to do its due diligence when the government was aware all along of the constraints that it was facing, really does a grave injustice to, I think, the people of Canada and to the members of this House who are here representing the people of Canada. So I think the other things that we in the NDP are fairly critical of is the fact that there were some missed opportunities in this piece of legislation. For example, we all know that this Prime Minister, both in the 2015 election campaign and in this House, repeated the promise that 2015 would be the last election held first past the post. That is a missed opportunity. And we actually had a special committee on electoral reform. I had the honor, Mr. Speaker, of sitting on that committee when it was going through the Atlantic Canada provinces. And I remember, hearing from Atlantic Canadians, both experts in the field, but also normal everyday Canadians who took the time out of their day to appear before our committee in Halifax, in St. John's, in Fredericton, and Charlottetown, to give us their views on what electoral reform should be. And I thought that that special committee, which was formed by this House upon the recommendation of my colleague from Skeena-Bulkley Valley, I thought that report was quite comprehensive and reflected the majority of the views of Canadians. And the way we reached a consensus, Mr. Speaker, is that all of the parties in the opposition side of the benches tried to work out our differences. I know that my Conservative colleagues have had a few problems with some of our ideas of electoral reform, but we in the NDP and in the Green Party and the Bloc Québécois decided that in order to arrive at a compromise where we could actually have a committee report backed by the majority of the members on that committee, that we would agree to hold a referendum to give Canadians the ability to decide whether they wanted to go first past the post into a new system that was perhaps something closer to proportional representation. Because it's just a fact of life here in the Parliament buildings, Mr. Speaker, that the governing side, the governing party, usually gets in with 39% of the vote. And the ironic thing is that 60 to 61% of Canadians actually voted for members of the opposition parties, yet our voices continually lose out when it comes to votes in this place. I also, Mr. Speaker, going on to the subject of missed opportunities, I don't think that this bill really does anything. My colleague from Vancouver Kingsway mentioned this. There was an opportunity to go back and extend the media blackout so that the citizens in British Columbia who have yet to cast their vote are not unduly influenced by a broadcaster announcing the results before the polls have closed. I mean, we talk about fairness in this place. Where's the fairness for British Columbia when you are lining up at 6:30 or you're about to just about to leave your house to go and vote, and CBC comes online and says, well, the election's already been won, we're going to get a Liberal majority. That is not fair to the people of British Columbia. And I acknowledge that we can't do anything about social media. We can't do anything about people on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram announcing the results through social media. But we at least can make an effort so that our major broadcasters are not dumping this on the news and providing those kind of updates. So I think that was a missed opportunity. I also think, Mr. Speaker, in some ways that we could have provided an opportunity for a per vote subsidy. You know, in the NDP, we've always talked about this, that the argument is made is that we shouldn't have public financing of our political system. Well, guess what, folks? When people make donations, especially generous donations, they're eligible for tax credits, which they can then apply. And so we are actually giving people a reward from our public funds. Political parties are eligible for reimbursement of a certain percentage of their eligible election expenses. And so our tax dollars are already being used, but they reward people with the means to make donations. And Mr. Speaker, before I continue on my particular vein, I just want to notify you that I am going to be splitting my time with the Honourable Member for Skeena-Foley Valley. And so continuing on that vein, I think that, when I look at a lot of my constituents, they struggle to pay the bills. Usually these families are living day by day and paycheck to paycheck, and they don't have the means to invest, $100 to a political party. They certainly don't have the means to invest $1,500. But it seems that the people who are able to do that, political parties, through this very system, we have to chase the money to stay competitive. But I would like to see a system where votes are put more on an equal plane, and that political parties are in fact rewarded for going after and getting the vote out and being rewarded in that manner, rather than going out and seeking the highest donor in order to fund their election expenses. Now, there are some good things, and I will sort of use the last bit of my speech by concentrating on the limit that's been placed on election length in this particular bill. I very much appreciate that the government has adopted my idea, because I introduced Bill C-279 in 2016, which sought to place a cap on the length of elections to a maximum of 46 days. I got this idea from the 2015 election, where we all had to go through the marathon 78-day campaign. And I had a lot of constituents who were asking me, why do we need an election that's 78 days? We could easily make our decision in 36 days. We could make our decision in 40 days. Well, obviously, the intent was to lengthen the election to such a point where money became an incredibly huge factor. And when we look to our neighbors in the South, the influence of money in politics, it's an insidious thing, and it can be a slippery slope. So I'm very glad that the government has taken my private member's bill and sucked it up into Bill C-76 to make it a part of this legislation. I am very glad to see that. I am also glad, Mr. Speaker, to see that we will be registering future electors from age 14 to 17, that we will allow childcare expenses to be reimbursed. I'd like to see more single parents able to have the opportunity to run as candidates, and I think if we're going to truly be a representative House, we have to start reaching out to members of our society who don't often get that opportunity. But there are also, we had an opportunity with the member for Burnaby South, his bill, which would have rewarded political parties for trying to establish some equity. But I see my time is getting up, Mr. Speaker, so I will conclude there by just acknowledging that the NDP will be giving its support in principle to this bill at second reading. we of course know that there's going to be a lot of hard work in the committee ahead.